Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this week's PAVE panel. As a reminder, you will be able to find the full recording of this panel as well as all of our previous virtual panels on our YouTube channel, on our website at pavecampaign.org, and our social media channels at PAVE Campaign. So welcome officially to PAVE's 115th panel. We're going to be talking about AVs and accessibility today. Specifically about goMARTI, Minnesota's Autonomous Rural Transit Initiative. goMARTI is an on-demand autonomous shuttle project located in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, that was created to explore accessibility-focused public transit in rural communities by providing free on-demand rides in automated May mobility shuttles. My name is Caitlin Magny Miller. I'm PAVE's Communications Manager, and I'll be the moderator for this panel today. So let me take a minute to introduce our guests and then we'll get started. Our panelists today include Tammy Meehan Russel. She is the president at the Plum Catalyst. Tara Olds, she's the director of connected and automated vehicles at MnDOT. And Mychael Mulhern, he is the director of customer success at May Mobility. Thank you all so much for joining us today. All right, let's get started. So I am going to start with Tara. Can you just share a little background on how the goMARTI project got started and what the goal of this pilot was?
Definitely, and thanks for having me, Caitlin. So the goMARTI project, I think, is really unique in that it wasn't something that governments came up with or even necessarily consultants like we see a lot of the work happening in AV technology to date, but it was really community driven. The community identified some challenges in their own community with regards to transportation or lack of transportation options, particularly for specific folks. And they started to look at potential solutions. And so not gonna lie, as much as I want to take a lot of credit for building an amazing project, they came to MnDOT after there was a lot of partners already brought on board. Acknowledgement that they thought they had identified a potential solution that would look at using AV technology to provide transportation as kind of on-demand service to different folks in different areas of the community, and asked MnDOT to be a partner. And we have a program within the state of Minnesota called the CAV Challenge. It allows people to come with different projects, propose ideas that really look at how we're trying to solve technology challenges of today and the future, and really help align with the MnDOT mission to make things that will be safer, more accessible, and help people get to and from where they need to get. So they came to us and asked if we would be a partner at that point through our program, and we got to jump on and really help establish some goals together. So we looked at the opportunity to, one, educate and inform people about the technology. Exposure to technology is a huge benefit, helps people understand what the technology is, what it isn't, where it can go, how it can help benefit them. Additionally, we wanted to understand and help advance technology in winter weather. We've done some other pilots in winter weather, but this one was a little bit different technology and allowed us to see maybe there's more opportunities, more advancements, and we were in a rural climate. So I'm sorry, a rural part of the state that gets a lot more snow than some of the other places we've tested. So there was a lot of opportunity there. But then just also ways that we can enhance the transportation system for a number of folks that maybe today their needs aren't met. You are still muted, Caitlin.
Sorry about that. Maybe Tammy can add a little bit more there about how the Plum Catalyst got involved, and was this a new type of opportunity for you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Caitlin. And I think Tara did an amazing job talking about the project and how it got started. I'll just kind of fill in some gaps here and give a little bit more insight on how the Plum team got into this. So Plum is a strategy and innovation consulting firm. So we do some support for tech companies. And so in this case, working with May Mobility, work in Minnesota, Texas, and California. And there was definitely interest in looking into Minnesota, which also happens to be where I'm based. And so in Minnesota, sit on the Governor's Advisory Council, and so mentioned the idea of doing a pilot project. And as Tara said, it really became a community interest, especially when the Iron Range Commissioner. So in Minnesota, there's an entity called the Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation, which is actually a state designated agency that is a sister agency to MnDOT. And when the commissioner for the Iron Range was in those Governor's Advisory Council meetings and leaned over and said, if you ever have a technology company interested in doing some winter weather piloting, we would love to have that on the range. And so that just started the discussion and kind of facilitating some introductions between them. And I would say Tara was exactly right on in saying became a community-led initiative. So bringing in a lot of key stakeholders in the local community in Grand Rapids, as well as some of the stakeholders with the Iron Range, some more of the regional stakeholders. A lot of people started to express a lot of interest, and that's where we came up with the 4 goals of kind of advancing the technology, which is helping support the tech companies in rural and winter conditions, providing that accessibility focus, which was really driven by Myrna Peterson, who also sits on the Governor's Advisory Council. And we could talk about Myrna a little bit later. But also the third goal was around workforce and economic development, which was a big interest to the Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation, as well as the city and the county. If we're going to have a technology pilot program, how can we inspire our youth to try out these new technologies as well as stay here on the range? And then finally getting into engaging at the deepest level and most innovative level, and making sure we're truly building trust and deep community engagement through everything we do. And so those 4 goals were really defined by the community and the stakeholders, and making sure everybody kind of went along for the ride as we were developing the project and ultimately launching. And here we are 18 months later, still enjoying it.
Great to hear what a community effort this was. I'm wondering, Mychael, if you can tell us a little bit about the shuttles themselves. One of our audience members asked if you're using safety drivers in this pilot, and are there any limitations you might run into, say with winter weather, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. For this project, we're using our Toyota Sienna platform, and we have 5 operational shuttles, including 3 wheelchair accessible vehicles. And those vehicles are considered self-driving, but yes, we do include what we call an autonomous vehicle operator, or AVO. You'll probably hear me use the term AVO in each shuttle, and they are there to really verify the safety operations and aid passengers as needed. And I think we'll have some accessibility questions later where we'll talk a little bit more about that. As mentioned by both Tammy and Tara, one of the goals of the project was to study the operation of AVs in rural winter conditions. So our vehicles don't need to see the paint lines on the road because we use a variety of sensors such as radar, LiDAR, GPS, and visual cameras. What we are cautious about, though, with our ODD is precipitation that's significant enough to interfere with the camera and the sensors. So if that happens and the hardware performance is impacted, we would switch over to manual operations for safety reasons. You'll hear me say safety a lot. It's always our primary concern, as everyone knows. The good news is that switching back and forth between autonomy and manual is extremely easy within our platform, and it can be done by the AVO within the cabin. There's no need to go back to the site. There's no need to get out and make any changes to the vehicle. It's really quite simple as the push of a button. And then I think that part of it was about a time of day within the question. We don't have any time of day concerns with our vehicles or our ODD.
Great. So yeah, you've all touched a little bit on accessibility. Let's talk about that a little bit more in depth. So maybe let's start with Tammy. At a high level, how would you say the goMARTI project prioritizes accessibility for disabled individuals in its autonomous shuttle services?
Yes, fantastic questions. And so goMARTI, or MARTI, stands for Minnesota's Autonomous Rural Transit Initiative. I've struggled with, do we change the name to Minnesota's Accessible Rural Transit Initiative, because it is so front and center for all of us, honestly, as we think about how we approach the project. And a lot of that does have to do with Myrna Peterson, who I mentioned earlier, who is the founder of a nonprofit organization called Mobility Mania. She is just an amazing voice that we have. She's a retired educator who's quadriplegic. In her words, not mine, she has one thumb that works, but a mouth that won't quit. And so she uses that to advocate on behalf of everyone who needs accessibility in transportation. And so we try to first define accessibility using a variety of lenses. So a lot of people think about accessibility and they think about wheelchairs, but we try to extend that a little bit more. And so really for our project, it was starting with how do we define it? And so in some cases, it's defining it from a digital accessibility. We have a a smartphone application that you use to book your ride on demand, and that's powered by VIA. And recognizing not everyone has a comfort with using a smartphone application. And so we partnered with the local call center, and we consider that an aspect of our accessible features of the shuttle projects. The local call center has 24-hour support to help people with how they use goMARTI, how they can book a ride, and they can actually book a ride with the call center. So that's one way that we approach accessibility. Another way is we've kept rides free. So a financial accessibility. We wanted to make sure everyone would have the option to ride goMARTI, and we wouldn't have that with any financial constraints during the pilot. And so we have made sure that we could keep the rides free for the course of this pilot. And we haven't even touched on the fact we've been awarded federal funding. And so as we continue to expand and extend goMARTI into new areas and under a whole new timeline, we've continued to keep that important for us in that the rides are offered for free. We also look at getting to and from the shuttle. So it's not only making sure the shuttles themselves have wheelchair accessibility, but how are the on and off points and the accessible places that someone would meet a shuttle? How accessible is it with snow, and how accessible is it without snow? And making sure that we're looking in all weather, and it's easy to meet the shuttle where it's picking up and dropping off. We have about 70 pre-programmed stops. I think we're up to 75 now, 75 pre-programmed stops that are really virtual stops. And we have done some research on all of those stops to actually see how we're doing on accessibility, to make sure that we are starting to track to improving accessibility in that way. And I can have Mychael talk a little bit more about some of the drills they do on the wheelchair accessibility side, but that obviously is a pretty significant part of the project as well.
Yeah, that's a great segue into my next question. So yeah, Mychael, can you talk a little bit about how May Mobility approaches the integration of accessibility features into your designs, and are there ongoing efforts to continuously improve accessibility in your vehicles?
Yeah, absolutely. Accessibility and making transportation available to everyone is one of May Mobility's primary objectives. It is really something that is throughout our company internally, and it's something that we're always talking about and thinking about. So we work really closely with Brawnability to upfit the Sienna platform that includes wheelchair ramp, restraints, and a variety of accessible, what we call in-cabin features. And then we're also working to improve our end user or rider experience, which includes the mobile app I know Tammy mentioned, and some of the other in-cabin features. Our product team is exploring ways currently to build into the cabin some features with whether it's speakers, display features that will help passengers who have audio or visual impairments, in addition to physical challenges, be able to see and hear and get important information about their trip. And that is particularly on our roadmap for our rider only or non-AVO services in the future. But we're still considering how do we integrate those improvements within the existing AVO service, and that would directly impact the goMARTI rider population.
Great. Tara, from your standpoint, what role does MnDOT play in promoting accessibility and inclusivity in autonomous vehicle initiatives like goMARTI?
This is one of my favorite things to talk about, so I'm really glad you asked it, Caitlin. So I think that there's a really great opportunity for particularly government, and I work for state government, so I get to say that there, but to ensure that as technology rolls out, that it's really benefiting everybody. As we talk about AV, we talk about these potential amazing safety benefits. And I want to ensure that as we see that's realized by everybody, and that everybody gets to see those safety, gets to increase their accessibility and mobility options, that it's not just for a select few, whether it's specific demographics, specific types of transportation users, or specific parts of the world. As people probably have heard me say, it's really critical when we talk about accessibility to acknowledge that accessibility 100% of the time in the state like Minnesota is really critical. I don't want some technology to only work 6 months out of the year, which is one of the really great benefits of having May come and try to advance their technology so it can be accessible 100% of the time in a winter storm to the best of our ability. When I'll say that vehicles should maybe be on the road versus not be on the road, as there's probably some discrepancies there. So I think there's a really good opportunity for government to be that voice and to make sure we put in place different protections, different policies, so that as we see technology rolled out, it's not just that creating accessible opportunities for some, but really it's making enhancements for everybody.
Absolutely. Certainly a part of accessibility, I imagine, is public feedback. So let's talk a little bit about that. Starting maybe with Mychael, have you guys gotten any feedback from the community on accessibility features? And if so, how has that influenced the design and the implementation of these features in the shuttles?
Yeah, we love feedback. It's really a big part of our process. We're very open to feedback on our vehicles, with the technology as well as the actual performance of the service. So we develop a relationship directly with riders, and we collect their feedback to improve our services. And many of the elements in the vehicle are mandated by legal requirements, right? But we've tweaked some of those elements where we can to improve the design and improve the experience. Things like better labeling inside the vehicle, grip tape, whether it's on the floor or on the door handles, things that people can struggle with a lot of the time. And then with our digital experience, we've incorporated, our product team uses a universal design principles to ensure the vehicle is usable by diverse rider populations. And really it's for everyone. Anyone who wants to use the service, we want to make sure it's available for them. And then with specifically on accessibility, we've got a consortium of diverse advocates, right? We already heard about Myrna, Mobility Mania, that's been very key for us as a partner as well. We have these internal and external advocates who provide direct feedback on our product, and we're here to listen and we're here to incorporate these improvements so that we're continuously getting better and improving the accessibility. Internally, we have a group we call the Autonomous Vehicle Accessibility Advocates, and our goal is to thoroughly review our own accessibility standards. We want to make sure that our standards internally at May are above and beyond general public standards, which quite frankly are not always good enough. And we want to make sure that we're going above those guidelines with our own steps for accessibility. And then goMARTI, I know Tammy touched on this, but just some real examples of what we've done. We've made multiple route and stop adjustments. You know, Tammy mentioned over 70, I think we're over 75 stops now. In the last year or so, specific to accessibility, getting in and out of the shuttles, we've moved door stops to Majestic Pines, the Pillars, River Grand, Brookstone Manor, all senior living facilities where we heard there were challenges getting to the vehicles, right? The stops weren't close enough to the doors. So we adjusted those to make those better. And then I can't go through this without mentioning Target and Super One. Those are by far the two most popular stops. And those are other examples where we heard from the community and moved those stops closer to the door. And since doing that, ridership at both locations has skyrocketed. So it's really nice to see the benefit, you know, use the community feedback on accessibility and the overall performance and put it into practice and then see those benefits in the real world examples.
That's great to hear. So, Tammy, you already talked a little bit about Myrna, who has really positively been impacted by this pilot, it sounds like. Do you have any other personal stories of riders that you've heard from who have similarly benefited?
Oh yes, so many great stories, and I think we this is one thing that I think the whole team is really passionate about, and definitely my team is that ongoing community engagement and community listening and making sure that we are truly providing something that's not only a research project and valuable for our tech partner, May and VIA, but also super valuable for the community today and something they can actually use. And so I can talk about a number of things. I'll just hit on Myrna one more time because she has been so huge in this project. But Myrna is, as I said, a retired educator, quadriplegic, uses this as what we would call a super user of goMARTI. So a very regular basis is using goMARTI to get around town. And I think that she has just been impacted in a huge way to be able to get around town. As she says, quite literally, this keeps her off the streets. And especially in the case of winter, I think that's really helpful. The other thing I want to share is it's not only about the autonomy part of it, but in a rural community like Grand Rapids, what we learned in some of our very early community engagement exercises was just the concept of transit. And then you start to talk about microtransit, and then you add the words like on demand, like it's Uber or Lyft, and people look at you like maybe you have horns growing out of your head or something. They don't have Uber and Lyft in Grand Rapids, so many people have not used it, especially in our target group that we're trying to reach, who don't currently have access to any transportation today. And so we had to really change our vocabulary and start about 5 steps farther back than we thought, which is educating on transit and educating on how you use something that's on demand. And maybe if, depending on the person you're talking to, if they're even interested in the autonomy part, we might share that. But really for them, it's a service. For them, it's something they can use every day, and it's teaching them how to use an on-demand transit service, which has never existed for them.
Great. So on the education front, Tara, from my perspective, it seems like a lot of people who are opposed to AVs might not be considering some of the positive impacts that they can have on local communities like goMARTI has had. Does MnDOT play a role in educating the public on these topics?
Definitely. I think one of the things that I like to try to work with our communities on is explain the opportunities, but with that potentially the risks as well. I think it's really important for people to understand what people are talking about in technology of these potential benefits so that they can, I'll say, put a little pressure to make sure some of these things are realized as well. It's easy to just think of, when we think of AVs, to think of Tesla and what you hear in the traditional media. But when you have an opportunity to talk to folks in industry that represent different aspects than Tesla typically does, it's pretty powerful to see the impact that has and the mindset that it changes with people you can engage with. So I think informing folks, like I've mentioned before, what the technology is, what it isn't, what it could be, helping understand what they don't want it to be as well, I think is really critical. Because at the end of the day, my job is to really serve the people of Minnesota and ensure that we're meeting their needs to the best of our abilities.
Absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit and bring in a couple of audience questions that were submitted kind of beyond the scope of AVs. So starting with Tammy, what broader lessons would you say could be learned from goMARTI about improving accessibility in rural communities, even beyond autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. I love this question. I think the automation piece is really interesting and exciting, and the potential that automation, automated vehicles, especially in transit, can be amazing as we think about what the future could look like. But that being said, I think there's a lot of other technologies and a lot of other things we're using in goMARTI, and even as we think about future opportunities here, I think that there's a lot of things we can do on accessibility. So we look at it, I would say, in a couple of key areas. One of them is transit accessibility in general. How do we introduce technologies? And, as I said, the microtransit is new. And so how do we really train, educate, and learn what a rural on-demand microtransit system can look like using goMARTI? And so I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned there. And as we look forward for the federal highway funding through Attain, we are introducing some fully electric vehicles into the fleet with goMARTI and expanding that out. So there's a lot to be learned on what fully electric vehicles in a microtransit rural deployment can do. And I think that that's really exciting. I think the other thing to look at as you look at accessibility that we always look at is the workforce development aspects, and how can we keep accessibility front and center as we look at workforce development. So we do that from both an employer standpoint, like how do we make sure that everybody is understanding accessibility as an employer. That's a part of goMARTI, and May Mobility does an amazing job at this. So I think that's been really helpful. And I think that as we look forward, the other one is not only the riders, of how do we make it as accessible for the riders, but thinking about growing up future workforce and providing opportunities for everyone under that lens of accessibility. And so we look at it from not only, as I said, the mobility challenges, but financial accessibility, digital accessibility, Grand Rapids neighbors up to Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, a tribal nation. So as we go down Highway 2 with our electric vehicles, we're reaching out to tribal members, at-risk youth. How do we make sure that goMARTI is as accessible as possible for some of these other new groups that we're touching on?
Wonderful to hear how far beyond accessibility is going from what we might traditionally think. Tara, are there any benefits for the community from using AV technology that go beyond transportation benefits, for example, welcoming technology or more generally considering tech-focused careers?
Definitely. I'll hit on the first one there, just kind of welcoming technology. I think one thing we've seen in all of the pilot projects that we've done within the state of Minnesota, and this being our third public one, is understanding the change that people see with their perception to technology once they get to experience it firsthand. Someone might come in kind of being, not sure if they like it, or maybe being optimistic, but coming out more optimistic, more excited. That doesn't mean that they think everything's ready to go and we can remove AVOs and that we're all set, but there's an opportunity for them to see that they think that this might benefit them, that maybe it's not as scary, that there's a lot of safety precautions put in place so that they have the opportunity to trust where the technology is. So I think that really shows that the technology can be for everybody. But the second one I really like too, and Tammy hit on this a little bit, but that idea of technology focused careers. In my industry, we always like to talk about getting folks in transportation, but also we kind of now branch into technology in this space. And I think that those don't necessarily have to be different, but just helping people understand how career opportunities might look the same in the future, but also might look really different. And that your skill set today might be able to be enhanced and change where you go in the future. I always joke that I was a structural engineer by training, and now I'm in AV talking about things that I never thought I would have. So just kind of helping people understand that there's a realm of possibilities when it comes to learning and what they might want to do in the future and how their skills can best be used.
Absolutely. Well, we just have a few minutes left, but I thought we could touch on sort of looking ahead and what's to come with goMARTI. So let's start with you, Mychael. Last summer, you guys received a grant to extend and expand the program, which is awesome. So what will this look like over the next couple of years?
Yeah, we're obviously very excited about continuing the partnership for another 3 years. We very much enjoy working with everyone in Grand Rapids, and we've already started some of these conversations, but the three main areas of focus initially will be expansion to Minnesota North College, the Second Harvest North Central Food Bank, and Walmart, which is a very popular request. And then beyond that, beyond those three initial areas, we'll continue to work to grow our operational capabilities as a company and expand the route network within Grand Rapids, right? And as Tammy mentioned, we'll also have the added benefits of the VIA providing the electric vehicle service, and that will travel outside of the AV zone. So there'll be even more increased access to transportation in the local community, which is really a great thing. And then as we go through kind of some of these currently, and as we have done throughout the goMARTI pilot, we'll continue to partner with the project stakeholders and identify ways to improve, as I said before, not just the in-cabin rider experience, but the overall access to the service. We want to really focus on moving members of the community. And one of the things that we're really happy to do is hire a local site team, which is already in place, so that they can really interact with the community and help us understand what we need to do to continue to move more and more riders. I always say this, we're not a set it and forget it, kind of launch and leave service. We stay within the community and we want to be there long term. And we want to continue. Ideally, we would love to continue even beyond the 3 years, but we're certainly very excited about it. And I really think that the sky is the limit based on the rider improvements we've seen over the last 9-12 months, and where we go from there is really exciting.
Awesome. Sounds like some exciting things to come. Well, we have to wrap up now. Tammy, Tara, and Mychael, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We will be posting the full YouTube video recording on our YouTube channel and website later this afternoon. And make sure to follow us on any of our social media platforms at PAVE Campaign to see that as soon as it's released, or check our website, pavecampaign.org. Thank you so much to everybody who attended and submitted questions. We appreciate your participation today. Thanks.